Order. Darren Henry to move the motion.
I beg to move that this House has considered fatalities in childbirth and statutory leave and pay. It is a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, Mr. Sharma. I'd like to start today by thanking those who are here to speak. This is such an incredibly important topic, so I'm very grateful for all those who have given up their time to be here. I'd like to extend my thanks to my honourable friend, the member for Stafford, who has launched an all-party parliamentary group for birth trauma and is doing vital work in this area. The Member of Parliament for Truro and Falmouth, who sadly could not be here, but who does incredibly important work as part of the APPG for baby loss. I'm glad to see the member for Strangford, who has spoken passionately on this topic since being first elected. I will be focusing my remarks today on losing a partner during childbirth. The reason I called for this debate today is down to Aaron. Aaron was my constituent who came to see me at a constituency surgery in Stapleford with his 3-week-old baby, Tim, in his arms. Tim's mother, Bernadette, tragically passed away in childbirth. As I've stated previously, Bernadette would no doubt have been the most loving, dedicated mother who also had ambitious plans for continuing a long career in the NHS. She is missed tremendously by her loved ones. Aaron brought to my attention there are circumstances in the event of a death of a child's parent during childbirth in which the surviving partner is not entitled to parental leave. Aaron found himself in the agonising position of losing a loved one and having to raise alone a newborn child. This situation was then made worse when he realised he did not qualify for shared parental leave and pay. Aaron was fortunate in that he worked for an incredibly understanding employer who did allow Aaron the leave and pay he required to look after Tim. However, others may not be so lucky. It must be entrenched in law that people can have time with their newborn and time to grieve without the fear of unemployment. I have previously presented a 10-minute rule bill on this topic called Shared Parental Leave and Pay Bereavement Bill in order to try and make a vital change to this law. Unfortunately, I was unlucky in the private member's bill ballot, but I am delighted today that after being successful in the ballot, the Honourable Member for Ogmore has presented a private member's bill that would create this change. I am incredibly grateful to him for doing so, and I'm looking forward to following this bill as it progresses and supporting it as it progresses. This is truly a non-partisan issue, and I have been incredibly grateful since starting my campaign on this topic to have had support from members across all major political parties. Although I believe it's incredibly important to state that it is not an issue that affects thousands of people across the country, but for those it does affect, the consequences are huge. Changing the law to ensure that leave and pay is available to those who find themselves in situations such as Aaron will ensure that no other parent is faced with the devastating position of raising a child, grieving, and doing so in the shadow of avoidable job insecurity. It seems in cases such as this that people for whom shared parental leave was created to help are the ones often missing out. When faced with this life-altering set of circumstances, Aaron was confronted with having to cope with the challenges of being a new parent, the prospect of new job insecurity, and all whilst in the midst of extraordinary grief. I think that is more than most of us could handle. Parental leave in the UK is something we should be proud of. Since the Employment Rights Act of 1996 and the Maternity and Parental Leave Regulations 1999, entitlement and access to maternity leave and pay have existed. On a similar note, currently, entitlement to paternity leave or shared parental leave, though more limited, access is also fairly straightforward. However, a small change can close this gap that exists. Shared parental leave was established in 2015. When it was introduced, the government stated that it had been created in order to move away from the current old-fashioned and inflexible arrangements and create a new, more equal system which allows both parents to keep strong link in the workplace. Shared parental leave was introduced to allow parents access to their workplace and their family. Now that is precisely what is being prevented in cases such as Aaron's. It seems in cases such as this that people for whom shared parental leave was created to help are the ones missing out. When faced with this life-altering set of circumstances, Aaron was affronted with having to cope with the challenges of being a new parent, the prospect of a new job, insecurity, and all whilst in the midst of extraordinary grief. That is more than many of us could handle. Changing the law around shared parental leave in cases of bereavement is not contentious. It simply seeks to allow individuals the right to, under circumstances beyond their control, take leave and be with their child. Yeah, I will.
I'm grateful to Mr. Sharma for allowing me. I apologise for being late. The Honourable Gentleman has said now several times this is cross-party. It isn't a political issue. It's an issue basically of conscience. And allowing for there to be a change like this doesn't impact thousands of people. But I do hope in the course of my private member's bill we can work constructively. And I also say to the Minister, if he'll allow me, that he and I have worked together on many issues over my time in this House. And I genuinely hope we can come to some sort of position where this bill can be passed and bring about this meaningful change, not just for Aaron and his family, but for the people that sadly will follow him in these circumstances. And I hope we can do it in that cross-party process. I hope he would agree with me in that. To pose a question, Mr. Sharma.
Thank the honourable member for his intervention. I certainly do agree with that. I know he's campaigned, as I mentioned earlier, a long time for something similar to be done. So I'm glad he's taking this one on board. It's truly cross-party. I had all major political parties sign my shared parental bereavement bill pay bill. So I thank him for his intervention. I certainly do agree with him on that point. The businesses that employ individuals in these circumstances are being negatively impacted is a topic that I have heard raised as a concern. I believe some may have trepidation that such a change in law could cripple small businesses and who cannot afford this type of leave. To this point, I would say that firstly, it is an incredibly small quantity of people and businesses that would be affected. Again, this is not an issue that affects thousands. Furthermore, if such leave is not allowed, then that businesses could be faced with losing their valued employee, a situation I'm sure many would seek to avoid. I hope the effect a change would have on businesses would be small in comparison to the benefit that would be gained by the individual receiving leave and pay. To be eligible for shared parental leave and statutory shared parental pay, currently within the UK, both parents must share responsibility for the child at birth, meet work and pay criteria. These are different depending on which parent wants to use the shared parental leave and pay. For the mother's partner to take shared parental leave and shared parental pay, the mother must have been working for at least 26 weeks out of the 66 weeks before the week the baby's due. The 26 weeks do not have to be in a row. Have earned at least £390 in total across any 13 of the 66 weeks. The mother's partner must have been employed continuously by the same employer for at least 26 weeks by the end of the 15th week before the due date. Stay with the same employer until they start their shared parental leave. Practically speaking, a surviving partner could be entitled to take shared parental leave, but they would need to meet the criteria I've just mentioned. Aaron did not. This means that under the current requirements, many will not qualify for shared parental leave and pay. I'm determined that we should introduce a day one right for a parent to access both leave and pay in the circumstance of losing your partner in childbirth. As a father myself, I know that being a parent to a newborn is a huge undertaking at the best of times. I cannot imagine being in that position whilst facing the fact that your partner has died in childbirth. I desperately want to ensure that people like Aaron are never in the position of being without support. I truly hope that no one has to find themselves in the position that Aaron did, unable to share the beginning of Tim's life with his loving wife. But a change in the law would mean that for those who do, they do not find themselves without the law behind them. I'd like to thank those who have come here today to speak on this issue, and I look forward to hearing everyone's contributions. Thank you.
Question.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. First of all, can I say what a joy it is to follow the honourable gentleman and to wish him well in his endeavours to make this law. And can I thank as well, I didn't know until now, by the way, that the honourable gentleman has very kindly donated his private members' bill for this purpose. So I'm hoping with that consensus from both sides of the chamber that government will put their hands up and say, well, let's go with it and let's do it. And that will please both of the honourable gentlemen and indeed every one of us who has signed his 10-minute rule motion, which I did last year. I have a particular interest in this matter. The honourable gentleman for Broxtowe was right. I'm very proud to be a signatory to the 10-minute rule motion last year. Very proud in this Westminster Hall today to stand alongside him and alongside friends from all sides of the chamber on this matter. I know that the Shadow Minister, for instance, for the Scots National Party, has a particular interest in this as well. And indeed, I think maybe the Honourable Lady may have had a bill, a 10-minute rule motion or something in the past. So we've got a real consensus of opinion from everyone here within the chamber. This is a topic which is and is not and cannot be forgotten. And I know that my colleague and the Honourable Member for Broxtowe is determined to see the requisite changes made to ensure that those going through the most immense pain, unspeakable pain, unimaginable for us, have the level of support that they are entitled to. It is indeed unimaginable that the letter of the law would have the support that has been designated for grieving parents to be circumnavigated, as the Honourable Gentleman for Broxtowe outlined. I cannot understand, Mr. Chairman, with all great respect, how it is possible that someone who has lost both their partner and their child could not be eligible to receive the highest level of support. And I can only imagine that this has been unintentional. I try to be respectful in my comments, Mr. Chairman. You know that. So I'm sure the Minister, when he gets on his feet, will indicate the direction that government will go in relation to having this private member's bill kindly donated at this time. The member has raised this in an attempt to rectify that mistake, and I wholeheartedly support him in that aim yet again, with other members here in this chamber to support him. The interesting thing is that businesses are also asking for these changes to enable them to acknowledge the depth of pain someone is going through and helping in whatever way they can. So if you have this request from individuals who have suffered in terrible pain, and then you have businesses who support that, it seems to me that the consensus is building, and therefore it should hopefully be much easier to acknowledge the depth of pain someone is going through and helping in whatever way they can. And for that purpose, we look to the Minister, a man with a compassion and response to these things. And I know by his very nature of the type of person that the Minister is, I'm hoping, as I always do, for a positive response. The fact is that since government ceased part funding sick pay, it is becoming solely from businesses. The small and the medium business can find themselves struggling to offer support when their finances are tight. This would enable them to allow the small amount of time off or the shared financial leave with no burden on the company itself. It is, I believe, as the Honourable Gentleman for Broxtowe referred to, a small request, a small ask, but would have significant differences for people. As a father and as a grandfather of 6 grandchildren, the thought of this motion honestly strikes to the very pit of my stomach as I stand here, perhaps not really understanding the pain felt by those who have lost loved ones. But I do know this, without any doubt, that they need support and help to process and deal with this pain. So I was attempting to help one of my... I just give you an example of some things that happen. And I know that this story will resonate, in particular with the Honourable Lady who's a shadow spokesperson for the SNP, because I know some of the things that the Honourable Lady has experienced in her life. One of my constituents, my beloved constituents, I call her that because it's true, was attempting to find out where her stillborn son had been buried some 58 years ago when she passed away. She never did get to see or get the answers or hear what was going on. And the pain that lovely lady experienced over the years, for me, was something that always preyed upon my person in relation to him. She did so because she had not been able to process the grief at that time, and it stayed with her literally until the week that she died, all those 58 years. And I knew her very, very well. I put photographs over in my office. The system in place then told her basically that nothing happened and to forget it. You know, that's the way it was dealt with years ago. She couldn't forget it, of course, and live with it every day of her life. And I think this motion and this debate today not only gives financial support, but also the emotional recognition of their loss being meaningful and worthy of support to allow them to process the grief whilst having the financial help for that limited but a very vital time. The Honourable Gentleman for Broxtowe has done this House proud, and I thank him for bringing this forward. I think as well, he was there 1 minute, he's away the next time. The Honourable Gentleman for his contribution to make this happen. I really do look forward to something, a consensus of opinion from within this chamber today in Westminster Hall, but across the chamber, and I look very much forward as well to working, as I hope we will be able to work alongside the Minister to make this happen. I look forward to the two shadow ministers. Their contribution will add to the debate and reinforce the consensus of political opinion which there is, all wanting the same thing for our constituents. Let's do that. Thank you so much.
It's an honour to serve under your chairmanship. First, let me congratulate the Honourable Member for Broxtowe for securing today's important debate on fatalities in childbirth and statutory leave and pay, and particularly for your very moving speech today. I was saddened to hear about the personal circumstances of your constituent who inspired you to take action on this issue, and I really commend him for the work he's done on drafting the Shared Parental Leave and Pay Bereavement Bill, something I'm very sympathetic to, and I'm delighted it's been picked up by the opposition in the recent Private Members' Bill ballot. I also welcome the work done by the Minister, the member for Thirsk and Moulton, who introduced the right for paid statutory paternal bereavement leave back in 2018, which was very welcome. I'd also like to pay tribute to the work of my honourable friend, the member for Truro and Falmouth, who's done such fantastic campaigning on stillbirth certificates, and all of her fantastic work as chair of the APPG on baby loss. We work very closely together on issues affecting parents across the country. It was listening to the Honourable Member's speech today, I absolutely agree that there is so much more the government could do given the very specific circumstances he has outlined. It does not seem right that the Honourable Member for Broxtowe's constituent was not entitled to leave given the fact that his wife tragically passed away whilst giving birth to their son. And I do hope that the government does consider that there should be shared parental leave in these very specific cases where one of the parents' parents have died. I'm here today as the chair of the APPG on birth trauma, specifically to speak up for fathers who've also been affected by this issue. Since I shared my own personal story of the traumatic birth of my daughter in the chamber just in October, I've been inundated by mothers across the UK writing to me with their stories of birth trauma. But interestingly, it was not just mums getting in touch, but also fathers too, and that's who I'd like to talk about today. From reading the many personal and harrowing stories I've been sent, it's very clear that fathers also feel they're not being listened to and are often very traumatised after witnessing a traumatic birth, especially after the death of their partner or their baby. Birth trauma is caused by traumatic events or complications in birth. It's a term that can apply to those who experience symptoms of psychological distress after childbirth or physical injuries sustained during delivery. And those can include surgical procedures such as a sudden emergency requiring a caesarean section, or a long and very painful labour in a severe state of pain for many hours, or, of course, the sad loss of their own child. I'd like, with permission, to share some examples from emails that I've received, and can I thank the Birth Trauma Association for all of their support on my birth trauma campaign and for helping me to collate these stories. One mother wrote to me about her experiences at King's College Hospital in London. She says, "I'd been told to lie as still as possible, so I got my husband's attention, and he started shouting to get someone's attention as our baby had gone blue. She was exhausted and been placed face down on my chest and stopped breathing. We had to shout several times to get someone's attention, and the alarm bells were rung and my daughter taken away to be resuscitated. You can understand that my husband suffered PTSD for months afterwards." Another writes, "There was also a lack of support from my partner. He was left on his own for very long periods of time and was not kept informed. No one checked in on him. And considering what was going on with me, he wasn't a priority when it was a very traumatic experience for him as well." So imagine the terror that you would feel if it was your partner going through this traumatic experience. And it's very clear to me that birth trauma is not just affecting the mothers, who've obviously often suffered from significant birth injuries, such as my own, and also the psychological trauma that can stay with you for a long time. So I really welcome that in my own recent debate on birth trauma, the government has announced the rollout of the obstetric and anal sphincter care bundle to all hospital trusts to reduce the risk of injuries in childbirth. But I do think there's so much more that the government could do to help mothers with their aftercare. And we mustn't forget that the partners and the fathers also need our support too. And that's why I've been calling on the government and the Health Secretary in our recent meeting to add birth trauma to the Women's Health Strategy in a meaningful way and not just one line. Ensure that we recruit more midwives to ensure safe levels of staffing in maternity care. Ensure that perinatal mental health services are available across the UK to end the postcode lottery. Ensure that the postnatal 6-week check with the GP is offered to all mothers and includes separate questions both for the mother's physical and mental health as well as the baby. Ensure there's better education for parents to ensure informed consent, proper continuity of care, provide nationally post-birth services, and finally to give parents a safe space to speak about their experiences in difficult childbirth. So the government is to be commended for their support so far for my birth trauma campaign, and I'm delighted to be here to support the Honourable Member for Broxtowe, and I hope that today's debate is a reminder of how much more there is for us to do.
Thank
you, Mr. Chair. I'm delighted to participate in this debate on statutory parental bereavement leave and pay for those whose partner dies in childbirth, given that I almost died in childbirth. In fact, my husband was informed that I would not survive. I did, but sadly my baby was stillborn. So this issue has particular personal resonance for me. I have, over the years, championed the cause of statutory parental bereavement leave and pay and worked cross-party and constructively with government ministers, including the minister sitting in his place today. The 2 weeks paid bereavement leave for all parents who lose a child up to the age of 18 was a huge and very important step forward in improving bereavement support. And I was delighted that the amendment I proposed that this 2 weeks should also extend to those who suffered a stillbirth should be included in addition to their maternity and paternity leave, and the government accepted that at the time. When this legislation was passed, as the Minister I know will recall, it really was a very emotional moment, and it showed this Parliament at its best for those who had invested so much in these measures when it came into effect in 2020. And I was heartened about the support it could and I know will continue to offer bereaved parents in years to come. And I want to also take a moment at this juncture, Mr Chair, to pay tribute to the Honourable Member for Cumbernauld, Kilsyth and Kirkintilloch East, who successfully brought forward a bill to ensure additional leave beyond statutory paternity and maternity pay for new parents who have a sick or premature baby. Now, the ask today for 1 day statutory paid leave for those whose partner dies in childbirth is certainly one I would support, but as the Minister, I think, knows from previously sparring with me on these issues, I would go further. Last year, I brought forward a private member's bill that would provide 2 weeks paid bereavement leave for all those who lost a close family member. Now, we can debate about what we mean, how we define the term close family member, and I'm happy to do that, but the principle that as a society we should recognise the impact of grief, which can be so debilitating and profound, seems to me to be the right thing to do. It's an idea, I believe, whose time has come. It cannot be right that when we suffer the loss of a close relative, our rights to leave, paid or otherwise, are entirely down to the discretion of an employer. Thousands of employees are unable to take leave without fearing that it would undermine their job security. In addition, we know that those in less well-paid jobs are far less likely to receive any discretionary time off with pay when they suffer a bereavement, or have any compassionate leave at all, which is grossly unfair. And that's why I brought forward my private member's bill to address this. I tabled motions, secured debates, and presented petitions, and brought forward the private member's bill, none of which, I'm sorry to say, Mr Chair, managed to persuade the government. So I hope that the honourable gentleman has better luck than I do. I've long campaigned on better statutory bereavement support, and it seems to me that, given that we've come through a pandemic where loss and grief has touched so many people, my bill last year was timely. Rather than a specific provision for those who lose their partner in childbirth, despite being a very, very laudable idea on its own merits, I think the scale of loss for all those who lose a close family relative deserve to have statutory paid leave provision, and I think 2 weeks is not an unreasonable ask. On compassionate grounds, on economic grounds, the right support at the right time can ensure that people don't fall out of the workforce altogether and become economically inactive on mental health grounds. I think that's the right thing to do, because the impact of profound and complicated grief is truly debilitating. So I support the honourable gentleman's proposals in principle, but as I say, I would go further. I believe that one day there will be paid statutory leave for all those who lose a close family member. For now, I know the government remains unconvinced of those arguments on financial grounds, but there is plenty of evidence that ultimately this will be an investment in our workforce that will more than pay for itself. Research shows that grief experienced by employees who have lost a loved one costs the UK economy £23 billion per year and costs the Treasury nearly £8 billion per year. However, these costs could reach as high as £49 billion to the economy and £18 billion to the Treasury. So even if we judge proposals for improved statutory leave and pay, even if we judge them entirely on economic grounds, which I know the Treasury tends to do, it still makes financial sense. So I will keep making the case until it is delivered, and in the same spirit, I support calls today for greater recognition of the impact of loss and bereavement and the much greater need to support those who have been affected.
Thank you, Mr Sharma. It is a pleasure to see you in the chair this afternoon. And I think it's been a pleasure to listen to this debate, because I think it's shown the best of Parliament, people bringing their own awful personal experiences to the fore, but using it to try and bring about change for the better for everyone. And I'd certainly like to congratulate the Honourable Member for Broxtowe, first of all, for securing the debate and for his tireless and passionate campaigning in this area. And we heard about what his conversations with his constituent Darren and the tragic loss of his wife have led him on this path. And as the Honourable Member for Stafford said, it does not seem right that he was not entitled to any leave in those awful circumstances, and I think that really succinctly puts where I think most members are. I pay tribute to the Honourable Member for Stafford for her leadership and courage in this area, and indeed the Honourable Member for North Ayrshire and Arran, who has been a tireless campaigner on this issue, bringing also her own personal experiences to the fore. But I would like to return to the Honourable Member for Broxtowe's constituent, the tragic story, and we absolutely extend our deepest sympathies to Aaron and his family. And I think what he's done today, and indeed in previous interventions, has brought this issue to the fore. And whilst he's not been successful in his ballot for a private member's bill, I think that we have had very positive indications from my honourable friend, the member for Ogmore, who I understand will be bringing forward a similar bill, and I encourage the Minister, I'm sure, will meet with the honourable member for Ogmore in due course to ensure that that is something that we will be able to get over the line. As has been acknowledged already, the circumstances in which Aaron found himself are thankfully very uncommon. The number of mothers who sadly pass away within 42 days of giving birth was 261 between 2019 and 2021. But even so, 261 is too many, and it goes without saying each and every death is a tragedy. And I would like to put on the record our sincere condolences to all those families who have faced those extremely difficult circumstances and indeed unimaginable heartbreak. But I do think it is apposite that we take an opportunity to look at the UK's comparative maternal mortality rate, and I note that recent research published found that the UK had a rate of maternal mortality many times higher than some of its European counterparts, and indeed performed second worst out of a study of 8 European countries. I know those figures are clearly concerning, and I appreciate it's not really for this particular minister to address moral matter for his counterpart in the Department for Health and Social Care. And in many respects, national comparisons really do not get across just how hard and difficult it is for people like Aaron who face this devastating situation. But it is the fact that they can fall through the cracks in the way that we've heard today shows how there are deeper problems with the protections afforded to workers in this country. In this example, the gaps are evident at present. As we've heard, the only right to statutory bereavement leave is for parents who have lost children up to the age of 18, and in those circumstances they're entitled to 2 weeks of leave. And while leave is a day one right, the entitlement to pay is conditional, and it's conditional upon them being in employment for at least 26 weeks and earning at least £123 over an 8-week period. Paternity leave and paternity pay have similar requirements, and it means that sometimes you can have been in a job for 26 weeks before you're entitled to any support at all. And likewise, shared parental leave and pay is not really helping people in the situation that Aaron found himself in. Not only are there time restrictions on access to it, but there are also income requirements which can differ between the mother and partner. Frankly, it is a very complicated system, and I'm afraid the evidence is that it has discouraged families from taking it up. And despite being introduced with the aim of enabling more equal parenting, it's quite clear that with the latest figures showing only 2.8% of partners deciding to take it up, it's clearly something we need to do better on, which is why we want to see paternity pay, paternity leave, maternity leave, and indeed shared parental leave become day one rights. And that would mean that those facing the tragic circumstances that Aaron has faced would not have to see the risk of falling through the legislative cracks on top of what is clearly such a personal tragedy and extremely difficult situation. It's worth saying at this point, Mr Sharma, that there are many good employees who already choose to go beyond their statutory requirements, but it's clear there are also many employees who are not doing that, and that's why I think the law needs to step in. I think today's proceedings have highlighted an injustice, and it seems to me that everyone is of the same view that this is something that needs to be put right. It is clearly unacceptable that individuals facing some of the most tragic and difficult circumstances are allowed to fall through the cracks in this way. So it would be helpful to hear from the Minister about what the Government are proposing to do about this. If the Minister is able to inform the House of any research that's been undertaken into the issue, and actually it would be interesting to know exactly, if there is a figure available, exactly how many parents would have found themselves in this situation who, through legislation that we've talked about, would actually be supported in future. Is there clearly that would help in terms of an assessment of the costs that might be attracted towards it. And I know the Minister has already discussed the matter previously with the Honourable Member for Broxtowe. I wonder if he's had an opportunity to consider draft legislation, and if he's able today. I appreciate with private members' bills not always able to get a definitive answer from ministers at this stage, but if he's able to sort of explain whether what my honourable friend the member for Ogmore is proposing would be something the government would support, that would clearly be a welcome step forward, because what we've heard today is a compelling argument for the need to reform, and I think it's about time we got on and delivered it.
Minister.
I'm grateful, Mr Sharma. It's always a pleasure to see you at any time, not least in the chair today. I would like to congratulate the Honourable Member for Broxtowe for securing today's debate. It's a very important issue, and I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for bringing this to the attention of Parliament. I'm also very grateful for his ongoing wholehearted commitment to improving the support available to those experiencing a bereavement. Can I assure my honourable friend that the Government is deeply sympathetic to anyone who experiences the loss of a family member or loved one. The death of a child is a truly traumatic experience for any parent, and the effects can be both devastating and, of course, everlasting. It is for those reasons that I personally brought the Parental Bereavement Leave and Pay Bill to the House in 2018 and was delighted when the entitlement came into force in 2020. And it was my pleasure to take up the mantle given to me by my honourable friend, the member for Colchester, who had campaigned on this long before I had. And I'm also very grateful for the support I received across the House for that legislation, not least the Honourable Lady for North Ayrshire and Darren. And it surprises me not that she challenges me to go further than the legislation has taken us already, and that she wants to extend parental bereavement to a close relative. We have met on this before, obviously, to discuss it, and we have a slightly different position, but I absolutely commend her for her campaigning on it. Basically, the parental bereavement leave we introduced is in recognition of the particularly tragic circumstances of losing a young life, a child, before they even had the opportunity to reach adulthood. And we believe this sends a very important signal to employers that the issue of bereavement in the workplace should be acknowledged, and that we expect them to respond to all such circumstances in a sensitive and compassionate manner. But we'll continue to engage with her on her objective to get this into legislation. Parental bereavement leave and pay gives eligible parents the statutory right to take 2 weeks of paid leave to grieve the loss of their child. The entitlement to leave is a day one right, meaning that it is available on the first day of someone's employment. The 2 weeks can be taken together or separately to give parents the flexibility to grieve in their own way and without having to worry about work. In the tragic event of a stillbirth, eligible parents retain their other pre-booked parental leave and pay entitlements such as maternity, paternity and/or shared parental leave and pay. This ensures that parents have the time they need to grieve the loss of their baby. Importantly, it sends a signal to employers that bereavement and other types of personal loss should be acknowledged in the workplace. As is the case with all entitlements, employers are encouraged to go further whenever they can afford to, and to support their employees in unforeseen and unavoidable circumstances. Since introduction, parental leave and pay has supported thousands of parents during one of the most devastating periods of their lives, and I'm proud to have played a part in the role of passing that legislation. My honourable friend spoke very eloquently and passionately of the struggles of managing a bereavement, employment and caring for young children, but particularly in the case, of course, of Aaron, Bernadette and Tim. Of course, the majority of fathers or partners who find themselves in the dreadful situation where the child's mother has died at or soon after birth are likely to qualify for shared parental and paternity leave. This is because they will have completed the 6 months of work of continuous service with their employer necessary to qualify. Qualifying for shared parental leave would give eligible fathers and partners access to 52 weeks of leave to care for their child. In response to the Shadow Minister, the numbers we anticipate this covering in this situation, where a mother passes away in this way, is around 100 per annum. The vast majority of those will be covered because they've got the relevant level of service, 26 weeks of service, which gives them entitlement to take leave. So we think the people it would affect in Aaron's case around 10 per annum. But each one of those, of course, is a devastating circumstances. It was my pleasure to meet with Darren, with my honourable friend, some time ago, probably almost a year ago, I would say we met, and keen to work with him on his private member's bill to make this a day one right for leave and pay. As it was good to hear in this particular circumstance that Aaron's employer was a benevolent employer who did help in this circumstance. I think most employers would in these circumstances, of course, but I quite understand his campaign on this, and I think his points he made about the combination of being a new parent in a new job and with the extraordinary grief, as he puts it, that these people are going through at that time. I think he makes a very compelling case. Can I congratulate him on securing the support of the Honourable Member for Ogmore? And absolutely, I'm very keen to meet with both of them to talk about how we might help in this particular case, of course. Can I thank the Honourable Member for Stafford as well for her fine words yet again. Speech of the Year at Spectator Awards, a wonderful accolade, but really most of all for her campaigning on birth trauma and at the historic debate, the first time in Parliament's history, back in October, I think it was. As a father of 4 children, I think every birth is traumatic. I would say from my perspective, but I think in the circumstances she describes and some of the cases she describes in her speech, I think she absolutely makes a compelling case for the work she is doing. She challenges us to describe the support families receive following the death of a mother in childbirth, and we are continuing to work to address the recommendations set out in the UK Commission on Bereavement's report. To do this, we established a cross-government bereavement working group with representatives from over 10 government departments to improve bereavement support and ensure it is more cohesive across government. And can I also thank, as she did, the all-party groups for baby loss and birth trauma. Many employers, of course, go above and beyond their statutory duties and provide paid or unpaid compassionate leave. And we'd always encourage individuals facing difficult personal circumstances and their employers to have an open discussion to determine what solution best balances the needs of both parties. It is vital that we continue to promote a culture of compassion and understanding to these select few employers that do not respond appropriately to their employees' requests for time off work. In terms of legislating in this particular area, as my honourable friend absolutely challenges to do, and I'm very sympathetic to his pleas. Our only nervousness, I think, is set out by my honourable friend, the member for Strangford. We are always cognizant of the impact of any legislation on businesses. I think it's fair to say in this particular case, however, the small number of people I think that this is affected by, I think it is something that merits very close consideration, if I can put it that way. In this Parliament, we have also supported several private members' bills already, which will offer new entitlements and additional support for employed parents and families. And this, as I say, this always has to be balanced against the burden on business and exchequer costs, of course, as the honourable gentleman sets out. For example, in July 2023, the Employment Relations Flexible Working Bill gained royal assent. The legislation will give millions of British workers more flexibility over where and when they work. Flexible working arrangements will be particularly useful to individuals trying to re-establish a routine after a difficult personal life event such a bereavement. We've also legislated in many other areas, including for carers' leave, neonatal care, predictable working patterns, and indeed the tipping bill to enhance workers' rights during this Parliament. But I say, given such a small cohort, 100 people affected, 100 mothers we feel affected in this way, sadly lose their lives in this way, only 10 which were covered by the legislation that my honourable friend considers taking forward with the honourable member for Ogmore. Very happy to meet with them to discuss in more detail their proposals. We will, of course, continue to support the participation and progression of parents in the labour market without adding additional regulations where we can avoid that. So I can say I'm grateful to the Honourable Member for Broxtowe for organising today's debate, and to all those who have made points in this debate. I'm keen to work with him to see how we can take matters forward.
Darren, Henry, to wind up.
I'd like to thank everyone for their participation in this debate. It is a difficult subject and one that I think has been handled with great sensitivity and care. I'd like to thank the Minister, with whom I've met with about this topic on multiple occasions, who has always been given valued advice to me, and I'm extremely grateful for that. I'd like to thank the Shadow Minister for his non-partisan remarks and support for this change. To the Honourable Member for Strangford, I thank him for his support on my 10-minute rule bill on shared parental leave and pay, and as a father himself and grandfather, I know he's sincere in his support. As a member of a different political party to myself, I hope the Minister heard his words on how much there is cross-party support for this change. And I thank the member for Ogmore, not in his place, for taking forward shared parental leave and pay in his private member's bill. I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for Stafford for her remarks on birth trauma and changes, for instance, on help for mothers with their aftercare and healthcare added to the government's health strategy as well. I thank the member for North Ayrshire and Arran for her contribution on this topic. Clearly, she's very passionate about it. I have, I hope, been clear that a change in our laws must be made to ensure leave and pay is a day one right for those who lose a partner in childbirth. I'm once again grateful to the Honourable Member for Ogmore, whose bill seeks to do this, and I will be sure to support this bill through each of the stages in the House. Loss in childbirth, whether that be a partner or child, is one of the most devastating circumstances a family can face, and it is vital we put in place all the support we can. Thank you.
The question is that this House has considered fatalities in childbirth and statutory leave and pay. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order, order. The sitting stands adjourned.